Good Sunday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for July the 2nd. Today, we are reading together in Judges chapter 9, which is going to tell us the story of Abimelech. Abimelech is, frankly, not a good guy. It's a very interesting portion of the Judges story because he's not really described as a judge. Yeah, it talks about him ruling in chapter 9 and verse number 22, but there's just not a lot of other normal markers that would identify Abimelech as a judge. More so, he's a usurper within this text. So we'll talk about him and just talk about how this story of Abimelech really shows us the moral degradation that has taken place within the nation of Israel. Again, it's a downward spiral, unfortunately. Whenever we talk about Israel during the time of the Judges, they had a number of great successes while Joshua was alive. There's a number of really good things that took place as they were going in the conquest. That was because the people at that time, they were faithful people. But as we see on the screen, the status within Israel as a faithful people just goes down and down and down. As you can see, right now we're in the bottom third of the downward spiral or cycle of the Judges story, looking at Abimelech, Tola, and Jair. We'll look at Abimelech today, and then tomorrow read the 5 verses that talk about Tola and Jair and realize that there's not much good to say there either. And then we have kind of another status update that takes place in the rest of the text in Judges chapter 10 that we'll talk about tomorrow. But for today, we're going to be looking at Abimelech, and there's going to be some parallels between Abimelech and the Deborah and Barak story. So keep that in mind as well as we read. Just as a quick introduction to who Abimelech was, we need to go back to chapter 8 and verse number 30. Chapter 8 and verse number 30. Sorry about that. If you can hear that air sounding noise, I forgot I had the little air conditioning on back here in the office. Turn that off now, so hopefully that will not be as annoying to you as you listen. Here in Judges chapter 8 in verse number 30, Gideon had 70 sons, his own offspring, since he had many wives. His concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, and he named him Abimelech. So Gideon, again, had some faithful moments, but overall does not seem to be a very godly man. He acts more like a Canaanite king than he does an Israelite judge. And in doing so, he has many wives, many sons. We come to find out he has, I think, 71 sons would be. Well, he has 70 sons. So take away the one, there's over 60 sons that are going to be killed within the text that we see today. So just keep that in mind, that a lot of what takes place with Abimelech stems from who Gideon was and the type of man that he was. And it probably shouldn't surprise us that he has a son that really goes off the rails here within this chapter of Judges 9. Let's see. Let me get the text of Olive Tree. There we go. Let me get Olive Tree back online for us, and let's read together here in Judges chapter 9. Judges chapter 9, we'll read about Abimelech becoming king, which is interesting since his name means my father is king. Let's read together here in Judges chapter 9 and verse number 1. Judges 9, verse number 1, Abimelech, son of Jerubbaal, went to Shechem and spoke to his uncles and his mother's whole clan, saying, "Please speak in the hearing of all the citizens of Shechem. Is it better for you that 70 men, all of the sons of Jerubbaal, roll over you, or that one man roll over you? Remember that I am your own flesh and blood." His mother's relatives spoke all these words about him in the hearing of all the citizens of Shechem, and they were favorable to Abimelech. But they said, he is our brother. So they gave him 70 pieces of silver from the temple of Baal Berith, and Abimelech used it to hire worthless and reckless men, and they followed him. He went to his father's house in Ophrah and killed his 70 brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal, on top of a large stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, survived because he hid. And all the citizens of Shechem and Beth Millo gathered together and proceeded to make Abimelech king at the oak of the pillar in Shechem. When they told Jotham, he climbed to the top of Mount Gerizim, raised his voice, and called to them, "Listen to me, citizens of Shechem, and may God listen to you." The trees decided to anoint a king over themselves. They said to the olive tree, "Reign over us." But the olive tree said to them, "Should I stop giving my oil that people use to honor both God and men and rule over the trees?" Then the tree said to the fig tree, "Come and reign over us." But the fig tree said to them, "Should I stop giving my sweetness and my good fruit and rule over trees?" Later the trees said to the grapevine, "Come, rule over us." But the grapevine said to them, "Should I stop giving my wine that cheers both God and man and rule over trees?" Finally, all the trees said to the bramble, "Come and reign over us." The bramble said to the trees, "If you are really anointing me as king over you, come and find refuge in my shade. But if not, may fire come out from the bramble and consume the cedars of Lebanon. Now, if you have acted faithfully and honestly in making Abimelech king, if you have done well by Jerubbaal and his family, and if you have rewarded him appropriately for what he did, for my father fought for you, risked his life, and rescued you from Midian, and now you have attacked my father's family. Today, killed his 70 sons on top of a large stone, and made Abimelech, the son of his slave woman, king over the citizens of Shechem, because he is your brother. So if you have acted faithfully and honestly with Jerubbaal and his house this day, rejoice in Abimelech, and may he also rejoice in you. But if not, may fire come from Abimelech and consume the citizens of Shechem and Beth Millo. And may fire come from the citizens of Shechem and Beth Millo and consume Abimelech. Then Jonathan fled, escaping to Beer, and lived there because of his brother Abimelech. When Abimelech had ruled over Israel 3 years, God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the citizens of Shechem. They treated Abimelech deceitfully, so that the crime against the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might come to justice, and their blood would be avenged on their brother Abimelech, who killed them, and on the citizens of Shechem, who had helped him kill his brothers. The citizens of Shechem rebelled against him by putting men in ambush on top of the mountains, and they robbed everyone who passed by them on the road. So this was reported to Abimelech. Gaal, son of Ebed, came with his brothers and crossed into Shechem, and the citizens of Shechem trusted him. So they went out to the countryside and harvested grapes from their vineyard. They trampled the grapes and held a celebration. Then they went to the house of their God, and as they ate and drank, they cursed Abimelech. Gaal, son of Ebed, said, "Who is Abimelech, and who is Shechem, that we should serve him? Isn't he the son of Jerubbaal, and isn't Zebul his officer? You are to serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem. Why should we serve Abimelech? If only these people were in my power, I would remove Abimelech." So he said to Abimelech, "Gather your army and come out." When Zebul, ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal, son of Ebed, he was angry. So he secretly sent messengers to Abimelech, saying, "Beware, Gaal, son of Ebed, and his brothers have come to Shechem and are turning the city against you. Now tonight, you and the troops with you come and wait in ambush in the countryside. Then get up early and at sunrise and attack the city. When he and the troops who are with him come out against you, do whatever you can." So Abimelech and all the troops with him got up at night and waited in ambush for Shechem in 4 units. Gaal, son of Ebed, went out and stood at the entrance to the city gate. Then Abimelech and the troops who were with him got up from their ambush. When Gaal saw the troops, he said to Zebul, "Look, troops are coming down from the mountaintops." But Zebul said to him, "The shadows of the mountain look like men to you." Then Gaal spoke again, "Look, troops are coming down from the central part of the land, and 1 unit is coming from the direction of the diviner's oak." Zebul replied, "What do you have to say now? You said, 'Who is Abimelech, that we should serve him? Aren't these the troops you despise? Now go and fight them." So Gaal went out leading the citizens of Shechem and fought against Abimelech, but Abimelech pursued him, and Gaal fled before him. Numerous bodies were strewn as far as the entrance of the city gates. Abimelech stayed in Arumah and Zebul drove Gaal and his brothers from Shechem. The next day, when the people of Shechem went into the countryside, this was reported to Abimelech. He took the troops, divided them into 3 companies, and waited in ambush in the countryside. He looked, and the people were coming out of the city. So he rose against them and struck them down. Then Abimelech and the units that were with him rushed forward and took their stand at the entrance of the city gates. The other 2 units rushed against all who were in the countryside and struck them. So Abimelech fought against the city that entire day, captured it, and killed the people who were in it. Then he tore down the city and sowed it with salt. When all the citizens of the tower of Shechem heard, they entered the inner chamber of the temple of El-Berith. Then it was reported to Abimelech that all the citizens of the tower of Shechem had gathered. So Abimelech and all the troops who were with him went up to Mount Zalmon. Abimelech took his axe in his hand and cut a branch from the trees. He picked up the branch, put it on his shoulder, and said to the troops who were with him, "Hurry and do what you have just seen me do." Each of the troops also cut his own branch and followed Abimelech. They put the branches against the inner chamber and set it on fire. About 1,000 men and women died, including all the men of the tower of Shechem. Abimelech went to Thebez and camped against it and captured it. There was a strong tower inside the city, and all the men, women, and citizens of the city fled there. They locked themselves in and went up to the roof of the tower. When Abimelech came to attack the tower, he approached its entrance to set it on fire. But a woman threw an upper portion of a millstone on Abimelech's head and fractured his skull. He quickly called his armor bearer and said to him, "Draw your sword and kill me, or they'll say about me, a woman killed him." So his armor bearer ran him through, and he died. When the Israelites saw that Abimelech was dead, they all went home. In this way, God brought Abimelech's evil, the evil that Abimelech had done to his father when he killed his 70 brothers. God also brought back to the men of Shechem all their evil. So the curse of Jotham, son of Jerubbaal, came upon them. And that is Judges chapter 9. Abimelech is the main character, of course, and he is not a judge in the sense that we see previous within the text, where he delivered the people or fought on behalf of the people. Instead, he's a usurper. He ends up taking over a portion of land and making himself king without seemingly any input from Yahweh himself. He goes to his mother's land. Remember, he was the son of Gideon and a concubine from Shechem. So he goes to Shechem and he speaks to all of his mother's family and says, "Hey, why don't you let me be king over you? I could take care of you instead of having all these other guys that aren't even related to you be king over you. I'm your own flesh and blood. Let me do this." So the citizens respond well to this offer from Abimelech. He goes and he becomes their king. And in order to do so, in order to take the crown, he actually ends up killing all of his brothers, except one, who is Jotham. Jotham ends up running away and hiding for a time. He lived because he hid, which again is an echo of his father Gideon from chapter 6 and verse number 11. Notice there's a number of things that are involved in the killing of his brother. Number one, he is given 70 pieces of silver from the temple of Baal-Berith, a pagan god that is within Shechem. So obviously Shechem has not been purified of pagan influence. He's even able to hire worthless and reckless men. These are mercenaries. These are empty men. This is a coup. He is running a coup to be able to take possession of Shechem. So Jotham ends up going, and eventually Abimelech is made the king, which is a bit of nominative determinism, seeing as how his name means "my father is king." And normally if your father is king, then you will end up being king as well. And that's what we see happening with Abimelech here in Shechem. Well, Jotham, here's what happens. He ends up coming back, and he stands up on top of Mount Gerizim, and instead of pronouncing a blessing, as we could previously see in Deuteronomy chapter 11 concerning Mount Gerizim, he actually pronounces a curse. So there's a bit of irony that he stands in front, and that he stands on Gerizim pronouncing this curse on the mountain that should have been the mountain of blessing. And what he does is he pronounces this blessing in the form of a parable or a fable, that the trees, which represent Shechem, are looking for a king. So they go to the olive tree and they say, "Hey, you be the king." And he says, "Well, if I do that, why should I stop giving my oil in order to be king?" They go next to the fig tree. You be the king. He says, well, why should I stop giving my fruit to others and be the king? They go to the grapevine, say, why don't you be the king? He said, well, why should I give away my wine? Why should I stop giving wine out to be your king? But finally they go to the bramble, to the thorns, to the thorn bush. And they say, you be the king. And there's nothing that this bramble actually gives to others. It doesn't contribute anything in any way. It's just a bother in many ways. It's cumbersome to people as it's got its thorns and in its thickets and such. It says, fine, sure, I'll be king, no big deal at all. Well, that's not going to end up working out very well for Shechem, is it? Because now Jotham offers up this curse after he gives this fable, and he says, listen, if you acted faithfully and honestly in appointing Abimelech as your king, then so be it. If you think that you've done right by Gideon, my father, by Jerubbaal, by killing his sons, even though he saved you from Midian, and even though he did all these good things for you, if you think that's right, if you think that you've been faithful and honest in your dealings in this way, then so be it. But if you haven't been, which of course they haven't been, they were not faithful to Gideon. They were not doing honestly by Gideon and his family. They killed all of his sons. He says, if you have not done this, then may a fire come from Abimelech upon you, and may a fire from Abimelech come upon you, and may a fire from you be upon Abimelech. And of course, this is what ends up happening. And again, as you read throughout this text, again, I'm looking at chapter 9. I see 1, 2, 3, 4. I only see 4. And then all the way in verses 56, 57, 4, 5, 6, about 6 different lines of yellow. That means that God is only mentioned 6 times in this entire chapter. And they're little bitty portions of yellow. It means that God is just kind of mentioned in passing. What we see one of those times that he is mentioned here is in verse 23, after we were told at the end of verse 22 that Abimelech ruled over Israel for 3 years, that God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the citizens of Shechem. Here's God working behind the scenes. Even though God does not look to be desired to be involved in the story at all, he's still going to be involved. He's going to do so through his sovereignty and through his ability to work as he wishes to work. How does he work here? He works by sending this evil spirit, by causing conflict between Abimelech and the citizens of Shechem. And he does this so that the crime against Gideon and his family, that there might be justice for those individuals who had been unjustly and wrongfully killed by their brother Abimelech. So the citizens of Shechem rebelled against Abimelech. They challenged his authority and his right to rule. And Abimelech hears about this, so that just begins the conflict. And the conflict is multiplied by the fact that this guy named Gaal, the son of Ebed, which the name Gaal is an interesting name. I heard one guy who knows his Hebrew say that the closest kind of root word from the Semitic language for this is dung beetle, which tells you that this is just another worthless guy. This chapter is full of worthless men, the least of which certainly was not Abimelech. But this man Gaal comes to Shechem and rallies the people against Abimelech. You shouldn't let this guy rule you. You ought to let the ruler of, Hamor. There we go. In verse number 28, you are to serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem, not these people who have come and taken you over. No, you need to get back to who's the rightful ruler of Shechem. And I'm part of that, he says. Well, there's one who is there, who is Zebul. Zebul's the ruler of the city, and he's in league with Abimelech. He's not going with the rest of the people. He likes Abimelech. So he lets Abimelech know that this type of thing is going on, that you have now a full-blooded Shechemite in Gaal who has come, and he's speaking poorly against you, a half-blooded Shechemite. And he's saying that we should not submit to you. So I'm letting you know that this is what's going on. He's a Benedict Arnold to the people of Shechem. He sends them away in secret so that Abimelech can know what Gaal is planning. So Abimelech rises up and he divides his people into 4 units, which is similar to his father's strategy from the previous chapter about using 3 units. There's one more unit than Gideon's units. And he goes and he he goes and he gets up on the mountains. He sets up an ambush. Gaal seems to come out. If I'm reading this right, this is all happening during the same day. This where Gaal comes and rallies the people, and they have this big feast and the wine and such, the trampling of grapes in the house of their god, that they ate and they drank and they cursed Abimelech. So Gaal steps out, it seems, and he sees the troops, and he says to Zebul, look who's coming. And Zebul seems to taunt him and say, oh, well, those are the shadows of the mountains. You know, you've had too much to drink. That doesn't seem to be what this is. But then Gaal says, no, look, those are troops coming down from the central part of the land, and there's another one coming from this other direction. And Zebul, you can almost see him smirk and cross his arms and lean back and say, yeah, what do you have to say now, buddy? What do you have to say now? You said, well, who is Abimelech that we should serve him? Well, aren't these the troops you despise? You talked a lot, now go back it up. So Gaal leads the citizens out of Shechem. He fights against Abimelech, but Abimelech pursues him and beats him. Abimelech knocks him back and ends up going and burning the city. It says, let's see here in verse number verses 42 through 45. Verses 42 through 45, he took his troops, he divided them in 3 companies again. He arose against the city. They were able to get all the way to entrance to the city gate. He fought against the city the entire day, captured it, killed the people who were in it, and then tore down the city, and he sowed it with salt. He symbolically did this to render this city desolate and infertile from this point forward. 46 says that when all the citizens of the tower of Shechem heard, they enter the inner chamber of the temple of El Berith. It seems as if this discussion about temples and towers and such is almost synonymous language, that oftentimes the towers within these cities were the temples themselves. So everybody huddles up inside the temple, but Abimelech goes, cuts down a branch, brings it, tells his soldiers to do the same. They put all the branches against the tower, lights it on fire, and the place ends up burning. So all the people did that. About 1,000 men and women died, including the men of the tower of Shechem. So Abimelech, now he's on a rampage. He's on a roll. So he says, let's go to Thebez and let's camp against it and capture it and go against the tower that's within that city. All the men, the women, the citizens, they fled to the city. They locked themselves in the tower, went all the way up to the roof of the tower. And Abimelech comes and he attacks. He approaches the entrance and he sets it on fire. But as he's doing this, a woman, which remember, what did I tell you from the beginning? To compare this story with what we see in the story of Deborah and Barak. Just as within that story, Sisera was killed by a woman when he was least expecting it, here we see the same thing, that Abimelech approaches the tower and a woman throws a millstone from the top of the tower. It hits Abimelech on the head. It fractures his skull. And he quickly called to his armor bearer and said to him, draw your sword and kill me, or else I'll tell you about me. A woman killed him. So make sure you kill me. That way nobody knows a woman killed me. Well, we know it, don't we? We know it. His plan didn't work. We know that a woman killed Abimelech. All his sword bearer or armor bearer did was bring about his death a little quicker. But he's killed. His armor bearer runs him through. He dies. And then whenever the Israelites, it seems that when those who were with him saw this, when his own army saw this, that he was dead, they all went home. They all went home. The leader, the rally man, was dead. And they think, oh, well, there's no reason to be fighting basically against our own brothers and sisters, against our own countrymen. So I guess it's time for us to go home. So in this way, then, God brought back Abimelech's evil, what he had done against his father and his brothers, and he brought back the evil of the men of Shechem on themselves. So the curse of Jotham, son of Jerubbaal, came upon them. That's going back to verses 7 through 21. So again, what did we learn from this chapter here in Judges chapter 9? I think the real thing we learn is that Israel's just in a really bad place. Really, really bad place. There is no faithfulness here at all. There's no faithfulness to God within this entire chapter. Even though he's mentioned from time to time, there's no faithfulness. But just because there's no faithfulness does not mean God isn't active. God was still active. He was the one that sent the evil spirit to cause havoc between Abimelech and Shechem He is the one at the end of the day that the narrator tells us, the author tells us, he's the one that caused all of this to happen. So even if we want to forget about God, even if we want to ignore him and act as if he is not a part of what's going on, we are only fooling ourselves. God is active. God is in control. God is accomplishing his will, no matter how we ourselves might behave. And I hope that will be a strong lesson for us to consider today here from Judges chapter 9, and the horrible story of Abimelech, the usurper, a usurper ruler of Israel. I appreciate so much you reading along with me today on this fine Sunday morning. Hope that you have a great rest of your Lord's Day, and we're looking forward to being with our church family here in just a little while for our Bible studies and our worship assembly. It is the first Sunday of let's see, what is today? July, first Sunday of July, of course. So we will be doing our theme study for this month. And today's lesson is going to stem from Galatians chapter 5, verses 1 through 15, which emphasizes within this text freedom. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm then and don't submit again to a yoke of slavery. And then verse 13, for you were called to be free, brothers and sisters. You were called to be free. We are called to be free in Christ, and we're going to study this text today to see what exactly we are to be free from. I appreciate so much again you tuning in for this reading. Hopefully you have a great rest of your Sunday, everyone, and we'll see you again tomorrow as we read together from the short text of Judges chapter 10, but it will set the scene very well for us in our study through the story of Jephthah in chapter 11, in chapter 11 there, where we get into the bulk of Jephthah's story. But we got to set it up tomorrow by looking at the two very briefly mentioned judges of Tola and Jair, and then we'll read again another status update for Israel, and that'll lead us into Jephthah then in chapter 11 on Tuesday. But I hope to see you then. Take care and God bless.